Harry got his first A&P license in 1967. He got his first pilot license certificate in 1971. He is both a Taylor master mechanic, and I forget what the name is for our master pilot, so he's both of those. He was named the A&P of the Year in 1999, is it, Harry, for the FAA. Very accomplished guy. He's got close to 20,000 water landings and 11,000 hours, both hauls and floats, so super experienced. And with that, Harry, over to you. And we've got a lapel mic for you. Mike will clip it on so you don't have to carry this around. Turn this off, Mike.
That's it. That's pretty good stuff. This is something I do at presentations, is I wear a piece of flotation. And whenever I'm flying, where it's appropriate, including in some land planes, I wear flotation. I wear that in the hopes that, in my opinion, if you don't have it on, leave it in the hangar, save the weight. Because if something really happens, that you're going to really need this, it needs to be on. You want to have something that is egress friendly. You don't want to have too much stuff hanging out. You know, in our Cessna aircraft, it's amazing how many people get out of the side window of the front seat, and the doors are still locked, which has, in my opinion, a big problem with somebody trying to ingress the cabin from the outside. You may be able to get out, but somebody's still in there. How do we get to them? So let's think about that. Think of ways to make it better. Anytime somebody has a question, please sing out. We'll see what we can cover. I may not have an answer, but we'll work toward that solution. Title 14 of the FARs covers everything from the ground to space activity. And we're included in there in various regulations. And every time when we get ready to go fly, we are exposed to some of those parts more vividly, more in bigger details than otherwise. So Title 14 includes Part 23, which is airworthiness. How do we determine our airplanes are airworthy? What are the rules? How do they get built? 23 covers that. 43 is the maintenance to keep these aircraft airworthy. So before we go on any flight, is our aircraft prepared to do the mission, to do the job that we want to do with it? Among other things, you've got to have an ID on the side. Port 45, covers that. Port 61 is the certification of the pilots. You know, and Port 61 includes what is our recent experience requirements to be able to operate an airplane. Okay? Port 67, medical. You know, I'm still carrying the third class medical. I fly caravans on floats. They're bigger than what I could get on basic med. But Port 68, that was something I read a few days ago, and it's new to me, and that may be important to me for continued flying when I'm not doing it in the capacity that I'm doing it now. We get into Part 71 is airspace. They've got the alphabet A, B, C, D, and E, and G. So actually they don't talk too much about G because it's the bottom tier. That's a very important tier if you happen to be a floatplane pilot in a lot of places in this world. And then last is Part 91. How do we operate? The rules that we cover. And they've got it all covered. Right away on the water, right away in the air. All these things are in there. One of the things that I really like about our regulations that written in a permissive fashion in that they tell us things we are allowed to do. They also mention things not, but these regulations empower us to do many, many things in many ways and to do it safely. Okay? Now, I mentioned airspace. How many float pilots in here? Hey gang, I love it. how often can you go out and conduct a mission and not exceed 1,000 AGL? We've got, they're starting to creep up. People are admitting that you can do it low. But, okay, so over half. Okay, well, we've got in your area, I didn't see any Class B airspace, but below 10,000 feet in Class B, you're gonna have visibility of at least 3 miles and clear clouds. Okay, this is for VFR day. In the Charlie airspace, which we do have in this area, you gotta have 3 miles. You gotta be at least 500 below, 1,000 above, 2,000 laterally on clouds in a Charlie. On a Delta, pretty much the same, 3 miles, 500 below, 1,000 above, 2,000 lateral. In Echo airspace, under these conditions below 10,000 feet, in 3 miles, 500 below, 1,000 above, 2,000 laterally. G airspace says 5 miles, 500 below, 1,000 above, 2,000 laterally, but there's a little asterisk associated with Gulf airspace. Because if you're less than 1,200 feet above the surface and you're in Gulf airspace, you gotta have 1 mile visibility and clear clouds, okay? There are areas surrounding airports typically, or certain areas of operation, where that Gulf airspace only extends up to 700 feet above the surface, okay? Those are marked on charts. You got a little symbol that does it. And then there's certain little dashed line of a certain color around certain features on our Earth where the echo goes to the surface, okay? So what I'm getting at is these rules that we have allow us to do some things that require what I call some cold-blooded commitments. And in my education, I'm from Florida. I grew up in South Louisiana. The oil patch was what supplied us with our income. My dad was an aircraft mechanic. At 8 years old, I'm trying to learn how to hold a flashlight for a master mechanic. You know, and you start learning that. And in those years, I wasn't a pilot. I was the mechanic's kid. But hanging around those guys, you realize that this is going back some 70 years. I was 8 years old, this is 1955. And these guys are talking about, they've gone out and flown a day in air taxi and may not have seen 500 feet, may have never seen a mile visibility. Okay? And how did we do this? They did it legally, okay? But it's quite an effort to do that. With these rules that we have available to us, if we choose to participate in those activities, we have to be, I'm going to use the word proficient. How are we proficient in what we can do? It's another P word, we have to practice. One of my big questions, if you will, in reading performance requirements, when someone's getting a check ride, we have to complete the intended mission by demonstrating mastery and proficiency of the task recognized in the ACS and demonstrate sound aviation judgment while we're doing this, okay? Now again, the regulations give us vast latitude in doing that. So in that, as a kid in South Louisiana, at that tender age, I'm going to refer to him as Mr. Dan. Mr. Dan ran a seaplane base at a town near where we lived. And Mr. Dan was a guy known in the seaplane industry down there at this time. And this is, you realize, 70 years ago, he would hire green pilots in the spring. Now, we're not quite spring here yet, because this morning it was foggy as snow. But he would get guys to come in, had seaplane ratings, had some experience and so forth, when the weather was good, and then he would map out given missions that he's gonna do in the course of running a seaplane enterprise, South Louisiana in the days of the oil field, okay? After he got these guys familiar, he said, I've got one hard and fast rule. If I see you above 500 feet, you're fired. I'd like to read something here. It's one of many definitions. Learning is the modification of behavior through practice, training, or experience. How many instructors in the room? Okay? You guys have to do this. You have to teach people. And more importantly, they have to be able to learn. And what Mr. Dan was trying to do with these young men that came in to do it, that was his method of teaching. Because if they were still there in the fall and the winter, they're gonna have days that are a mile visibility. And you're gonna be operating, you might be operating at 500 feet, you're clear, you got a mile. And if you know exactly where you're at when you're doing that, you can meet the needs, you can meet the qualifications of doing it in a professional and a safe manner. And the only way that you can achieve that is to practice those exercises. When you're flying around 1,500 feet, the wire that's 200 feet over the waterway, that may be your guidance in poor weather conditions, is insignificant. But if you're at 500 feet, you can at least see it. And if you know exactly where it's at, hey, I'm coming around this curve, there's a wire, let me throttle back and land, I'm gonna step taxi under this wire, okay? And then I'm gonna get back in the air. I can fly 50 feet, 100 feet, I can do 100 knots. I can only do about 40 on the steps, so, you know, let's do it. I'm really fortunate in life, I can go to bed and I can stay in bed all night and not have to get up. A lot of my peers aren't so fortunate. So you're gonna make a trip to the bathroom somewhere that evening, sometimes multiple. At home, you can do this without waking anybody up, without turning on a light, and that sort of thing. Don't try it at the motel, because you're gonna stub a toe. So the same is true in what we're doing when we're flying. If we've got a given route, let's say we're going to the cottage, the cabin, you know, or a certain fishing hole, and we've gone there a dozen times, but we've never flown that route at an altitude that will be compatible with some legal weather minimums, okay? So you need to do that. Flying again, I mentioned cold-blooded commitment. You know, you can, if you take off, you're committed to land. If you take off at night, you're committed to make a landing at night. That doesn't mean you're gonna land at the runway with lights. If the engine quits, you're gonna land, okay? That's that commitment that we have to make. And that's part of what we do, gleefully, if you will, as general aviation pilots. I say that aviation is a virus. You can treat the symptoms, but you cannot cure it. So there we are, we have to find a way to make it work. But in any event, if we're gonna be in a condition or a situation that we need to get home, or want to get home, and can do it safely, if I've flown that route 10 times at an appropriate altitude, I can do it 11 when the weather is bad. Now, do you always want to do this by yourself? No. There are instructors who have been lucky enough to still be in the system, still be alive. No student has taken their life away. And they can share their experience with you to get you to a level that works. And it's up to you guys to cover that. Okay, this is going a lot faster than I had hoped on the pilot side of it. I have a few words that I want to add. Anybody in here seen Sesame Street? Okay. Sesame Street is often brought to you by a letter. And I was going to use the letter P because it was proficiency. That's where we wanted to start. Proficiency comes with practice. Okay, something that we can do alone. We can do it with instructors. We can do it. We don't even have to necessarily have an instructor, but maybe that guy, one of your flying buddies, knows that route. Say, hey, no, you don't want to go that way. Let's go around here. You know, instead of crossing a body of water in low vis, you can follow the shoreline. You've always got a good visual reference. In my opinion, and I fly about 300 hours a year, and I teach, give dual in seaplanes about 100 hours of that flying. And glassy water, in my opinion, is one of the most dangerous things that we can encounter. You know, you get students and you say, hey man, you can go to the water, you can't tell the difference between 50 or 250 feet. And they look at Harry, you know, he's a little old. I can see better than he can. I can do a lot of things better than he can. So what I try to do with those students is provide them with what I call, or one of my friends call, an aha moment, where you can take him out, and if the conditions are there, you don't get it for every student, but you get it for some of them. And on the first one, I try to get them as far from visual reference as I can. And I'm taking a risk. I'm making a cold-blooded commitment that I can keep this airplane and that student in a configuration that we can make a legitimate glassy water landing under those conditions. One case in point, I had a woman come over, young woman came over from England. She wanted some flying boat time. And we went out on a Friday, great time, we put in about 2 hours of flying. She said, I'd love to get another hour, can we do it? Saturday came, I said, I've got Saturday morning. We're at the airport, had the airplane pre-flighted, we're in the airplane at 8. I'm very fortunate I've got a good training late. That is, 90% of it is in the class Delta of the airport I'm based at. Good relationship with the tower, I get to train. We went to that lake and it was a mirror. She's in the left seat and I said, ma'am, this is the real deal. Do you want to do it? Out of her mouth comes, of course. You know, so we're off. The technique I use with glassy water is you configure the airplane so that it is configured at a speed and at an angle that is compatible with touching the water. You know, on every seaplane, we've got one little window where airplane overlaps boat, where both activities can go on at the same time. That's how we transition from a boat to an airplane. But we've got to be able to transition from an airplane back to a boat. We have to do it in that little window of airspeed and angle to make the boat, and I don't care if they're floats or a hull, to make that boat happy. Okay? So we configure in the aircraft she was in, about 65 miles an hour indicated, is where you get, using airspeed, it gives us the angle of the boat, makes it compatible with the water. And I want her to get 2 power settings to go with that airspeed, and one is to hold altitude, so that when we get set up, because I do a lot of, all those landings are basically, they don't, almost never set up as a stabilized approach. I pull power high, I pull power low, I pull power to worst time, but always, I try to have, not try, always there is an option for the student to land the airplane safely, or for me to help land the airplane safely. There's something available, okay? You don't have that option with glassy water. So you've got to, it has to be a stabilized approach. And sometimes you have to do what we call drag it in to the LVR, that last visual reference. And when we get there, I don't like pushing and changing and diving toward a surface I can't see. So what we do is we drag it up here with a power setting that holds altitude. And you cross-check holding altitude with the altimeter, And then you can cross-check your VSI to see what it actually means at that point. The lake amphibian, the boat I'm talking about right now, the Buccaneer likes 100 feet a minute down, okay? At 100 feet a minute down, if you go over the LVR at 100 feet, we fly a mile before we got a shot at getting to the water. So if I can go between trees and maybe cross at 50 feet, it's a half mile. 1 minute, cut to 30 seconds. It gives us more edge to get into that confined area. They're on a scan, that's the other side of the lake, that's my airspeed, that's my rate of descent, that's my power setting. And when you see rate of descent off, you don't immediately make a change. You review the other parameters. If they're there, a scan or two more, we gotta make a change. Lakes have wings that are closer to the water. So when we finally get there, that rate of descent creeps back up to 0. And if it stays there, okay, we're in proximity, and you can take a ½ inch off, and that'll allow you to push through the thing. If you've chosen an airplane in this boat hull, our tail feathers are closer to the water. And what can actually happen, if the stabilizer goes into ground effect, it pushes the nose down. And when I'm breaking in new DPEs, they don't always know that. And they bust my student because he pushed, he didn't push, he just rode along with what the ground effect did to the staff. So anyway, it's stabilized. Back to this young woman. Thank you. Back to this young woman from England. She did everything exactly right. And with her doing everything exactly right, I can peer out the window and I can say, oh, that's a water lily, that's a branch, that's a twig, that's an alligator, whatever. I've got an idea of how high we are. And I knew pretty much when she was going to hit the water. She did, she touched, perfect, power off. And out of her lips comes these two words, oh, shit. And I said, excuse me? She said, Mr. Shannon, we weren't anywhere near the water when we touched the water. That's that aha moment. And we've got to live through those aha moments and appreciate them. Now the reality of glassy water is, the next landings we do, we try to take everything in our power to mitigate the absolute of being out in the middle of nowhere and not knowing. If you're next to trees that you can see out of your corner of your eye, well, I'm at the top of the tree, I'm at the middle of the tree, hey, I'm getting near the bottom, let's make sure we're on our game doing this. You can have grass growing out. You can slip over the trees, right? It's like making it is a normal landing because you've got a reference that you can see in there. So we do that. So that P of practice, this is part of it. You know, if you don't practice these things, you're not good at them. You know, and we've got real professionals in the world. A doctor's office is a medical practice. You know, there's no guarantee, but you want someone in that professional group that's practiced a lot. So you're not the first one he's done the last 6 months or something like that. Prevent. We want to prevent the loss of our certificates. We want to preserve our ability to fly an aircraft. Going back to those regulations that we did, what are the rules? How do they apply? Am I current? Am I safe to go out there? Am I competent to do it? So that we can prevent accidents and we can preserve our thing. You need to plan. You know, this time of year, when are you going to make your first trip? You can get together, man, you can go out there and make tailwheel airplane, tailwheel people in here. I love it. This is the place. You can do 3 landings to a full stop. You're current. You got your medical. You got your basic med. You're ready to go, legally. But from a practical standpoint, that has to do with practice, you may not be ready. So you need to plan to get more than that. Sometimes we have to postpone, or we can put off doing something. I didn't get to fly with Bill or Joe or whatever this weekend, and we were going to practice ABC, you know, to get me ready for this new season. You guys are at a big disadvantage compared to me in Florida. You know, I get 20 days a year I can't fly. You know, you guys get 3-4 months, you can't fly. And that's tough, you know, and I mean, you can't fly. I mean, Delta, yeah, but, you know, they don't let me up front, so that happens. Preventative maintenance, you know, we're gonna shift to corrosion here in a few moments. The profiles, what are the airspaces we're operating in? Man, getting out of Maryland, and you guys were lucky. One of the years I came up here as part of, not independently, but as truly a part of the Seaplane Pilots Association to come up. And we had given a talk right here. The guy was the tower controller at Ted Stevens. He said, man, if I wants to come up and visit, here's his phone number, put it on the wall. So man, we get out of here, we have nothing to do for the day. You know, we called the number. We got to spend an hour on Anchorage approach. We spent 2.5, almost 3 hours upstairs in the tower. And you guys have got good tower people. I mean, they are special. You know, they're not jerks that are trying to move you around. Some days it may seem that way, but by and large, the airspace and the aircraft that these guys handle is truly phenomenal. You're blessed in that regard. Try to live up to their expectations. And if you do, they'll let you do things that would not be allowed in 99.9% of the towers, not just in Alaska, but in the world. I mean, you've got that. I saw some of that, not to the degree you guys have here in New Orleans International. You know, if they were using the north-south runway for the big airplanes, you'd land in there in an amphib, you go down there, you're going to be taken off to the east, which is going to cross that big north-south runway. And they'd say, hey, can you get off? Be turned southbound, northbound before the tower. They didn't care if they were looking at the bottom of your floats 100 yards away. You did what they asked, and they would keep letting you do it. Reserve, plan, postpone, pre-flight. Gentlemen, those aircraft are the tool we use, not the only tool. We use knowledge, a lot of things that we did, but we've got to pre-flight that airplane to make sure it's safe. Will it do the mission we have in mind? Where's Rocky? He was talking about missions he did that serious pre-flight, serious planning, because when you strap yourself into an F-16 or something like that, that mission takes on a whole new dimension of what's going on around you. You don't have the ability to, hey man, I'm gonna land on that little lake down there and check this out. So, and we, by and large, have numerous places like that where we're going. Mr. Dan from that little town in Louisiana would get you prepped out. Okay, we leave the seaplane base, we go to the Chaffalaya River, we're gonna follow it south, and then there's 3 camps in a row. The next opening in the side of that river, after you pass those 3 camps, you turn right. And now you're in a certain, that might be the intercoastal waterway, okay? Along that intercoastal waterway, man, it goes to Galveston, Texas. So, you know, we can go a long way. We're not necessarily going to Galveston, but we're going to follow it. And you're going to learn where every wire crosses that intercoastal waterway and that sort of thing. So, using your airspace, keeping a profile, keep your judgment on that. Okay, I've got pilot qualifications. Are you qualified to do the task you're doing? Are you feeling up to it that day? You know, some days you don't. Be honest with yourself. Be honest with your family. Be honest with your airplane. Who owns an airplane in here that's less than 20 years old? I see one hand. One hand. How many people do we have in here? 60? We got one person out of 60 that operates an airplane less than 20 years old. The average age of airplanes in this country is about 42 plus years. Okay, I did a pre-buy on a 1979 182 on floats, aero sets, 550 conversion, new glass panel, all this. And that, you know, this airplane was booked, reputed to be a 10. Okay, And in many ways, it was a tank, 2 exceptions. The engine had 200 hours left on it. So, you know, out of 2,000, a lot of that's been used up. And when I opened the covers on the wings of the airplane and other spots in the airplane, I saw corrosion inside. The little white powder. Every Cessna does it that was not corrosion proofed at the factory. This airplane was 47 years old. It was out of, let's call it Minnesota. We don't get corrosion in Minnesota. That's BS, because there's corrosion inside this airplane. Nobody in 47 years, and now I got my mechanic out on it, because it infuriates me that no one in 47 years used some of the simplest technology. You spray stuff inside the wing, and when it hits, it penetrates, it turns off. Corrosion is simply the exchange of electrons. You know, we dig aluminum ore and iron ore out of the ground. Different factories process this stuff, make space-age materials that we can build airplanes and space aircraft, rockets, everything out. The very first thing those materials do when we put them in service is try to get back in the ground. Okay? So when Cessna builds steel things, they often CAD plate it. The cadmium is not there to protect the steel that is coating. It's there to protect the aluminum where that steel piece is mounted inside your airplane. How many Cessna owners in here? Underneath your floor, wherever there's a seatbelt attachment, there's a steel bracket. And if you leave that bracket alone for 47 years, it has a chance of being rusty. Now down in our world, it will be rusty. Florida's warm, it's humid. Humidity provides the potential for an electrolyte. We said we have to exchange electrons. That's what batteries do. You move electrons around so that we can turn starters, turn on lights, and do all these things with our airplane. And you're discharging that battery when that's happening. So in effect, similar things are going on, different model if you will, but corrosion is that battery as well. We do a lot of work that comes out of the Bahamas, a little bit out of further down the Caribbean. We love it. Makes airplanes sound like a cash register. You know, I can do 100 hour or an annual on a Caravan, and I've had them run 125, 150 grand an annual. And we're fixing corrosion. You know, you've got warm temperatures, you've got salt water, which is fantastic electrolyte, man, away you go. You people up here are more fortunate. You've got an average temperature that includes your hot days. That's much lower than what I see in Florida and in the Bahamas and that sort of thing. Okay? So temperature is a huge catalyst to the equation that creates corrosion. The other thing is your electrolyte. Ed and I went to dinner last night, and we were talking about electrolyte. I made the comment, I said, what's happening with aircraft in Alaska is because of their age, although we've had a slower chemical reaction, we may have gotten lulled into, yeah, this looks good, yep, we're done with the inspection. We can put floats back on the airplane. It can't work that way anymore. You know, I wrote it down. Where have I got to find it? Here's my corrosion page. This line said inspect, repair, prevent, start over. And we do that. That circle never stops, because the aircraft you have are trying to crawl back into ground, and that we can't allow. Exchange of electrons, electrolyte, fresh coal. Do I have any questions? Yes, sir.
What's your favorite anti-corrosion product for spraying into wings and so forth?
We buy 5-gallon pails of Corrosion X and ACF 50. And it's what we can get when. And I equate materials like that to soap. I don't care if you use Dial, Irish Spring, Dove, Lifebuoy. If you use it regular, you're good in the group. And if you do the same thing with your airplane, I don't care what grease you use or what oil you use, but use it, change it, apply it, and you'll get the results, okay? We actually now, in my shop, we go through the AASF 50 and the Corrosion X in quantity. We do, every annual we refresh that activity. We get sometimes brand new caravans on floats brought to us for us to take them apart like it's an annual. I think we had one come in, had 17 hours total time. And we spent $8,000 on the airplane, taking it apart. The other thing we do, I mentioned those steel fittings that seat belt's attached to. And you've got nuts, bolts, screws scattered around the airplane. And there you have a different kind of battery. You've got a piece of steel screwed into a piece of aluminum, and these two elements have a different electronic valence, and there's a potential between them. For corrosion, I love stainless steel, because if I can get it next to aluminum, then I can go in there and change an expensive aluminum part that required drilling and riveting and painting and all that stuff, as opposed to seeing a CAD-plated screw. And as a kid at that seaplane base with my dad, I'm more than an adult now, I'm in high school, but I'm helping him do inspections and open and close. Ito 2960 floats, spreader bar goes through the float. Underneath that spreader bar where the strut fitting and the long bolts go down, there's a clamp, they call it. It's got a little cutout that hits the spreader bar, flat on the bottom, bolt about that long, drops down through a washer and a nut. And you can get a flashlight and a mirror, and you can look at that nut. And if it's 2/3 or more CAD plated, where no rust on it, there will be absolutely no corrosion where that nut attaches to that 2024 bracket or saddle that Ito has clamping that spreader bar. When you look at that nut and it's 50% rusty, 50% CAD plate, because the cadmium's acting like an anode to protect the aluminum. It's a sacrificial element, not to put on the bolt to protect the bolt, but to protect the structure that bolt is being used in, okay? Then you can look, when the cadmium's half gone, there'll be just the smallest white edge where the washer meets the aluminum structure. When it's 3/4 gone, it's a nice evident powdery ring, and you can see it between the nut and the washer, between the washer and the clamp, okay? So stainless can be used, and I didn't believe this till a few years ago. There's a product out there, and you guys may see it, it's called Tef Gel. Tango Echo Fox, Gulf Echo Lima, Tef Gel. And a nerd from up in the Northeast, he was a flunky for Bell Labs up there. They'd say, hey, go to the warehouse, get this. But he had a brain. And he would see what these guys were doing in the lab and that sort of thing. He eventually got fed up with the cold, came down to Florida, and he could do things, somebody said, man, I wish I could get the radar working in my boat. And I might be able to help. And what he did about 90% of the time was went in these saltwater vessels and found bad connections, coax connections and grounds and stuff like that, and he would fix them. He also encountered something called the comm mast. So this is an aluminum mast, and out of it, up there's the radar and comm antennas and all that stuff. And there's the connection when this is put on the boat, all these have connection, and they're behind the panel. And he struggles to get the panel off. So what he did, he had a little notebook, and he'd mix up some snake oil, and 50 weight oil and, TCP, I don't know. But he would put this stuff on the screws when he reassembled. And he'd write down the name of the boat, the date, put it away. His dad comes down from up north, wants to fool around. They went over to the Cape, they bought a pallet. On that pallet was a device for mixing different things. It looked like an old roots blower, but what the dad wanted to do was mix Teflon with some lubricants, powdered Teflon. There was also a pail, 6-gallon pail on the container. And when he got around to opening it, hey man, that's a sticky grease. So he got a little container, put it in his pocket, he goes out, puts comm mass together with it. A year later or whatever, he's going to the Anabi or whatever the boat is, pulls a screwdriver out, wow, this is great.
Yeah.
And the screws came out. He told his dad about it. First thing dad wanted to do was mix Teflon with it. And we got Tef Gel. It's white, and it works. We've been using it now for probably 8 years. It's not a lubricant. It's not an insulator more than anything else. I think it's a water protectorant, where when you put this on a bolt or something that you want to be able to get back out, it adheres to that bolt in a fashion that the electrolyte can't get to the surface of the bolt. And if the electrolyte can't get there, it's not going to rust. And we use it, for example, wingtips, on lakes. They're eye level. Everybody in the world, when your airplane's on the ground, can see them. And you put steel screws there and you work in the Bahamas or whatever, they get rusty. Okay? Well, we put in stainless, and guy comes in for an end, you take the wingtip off, around every screw is a nickel to a $50 spot of corrosion. Okay? You gotta fix it. And one owner comes in, we point this out to him and said, look, what we do is we take calculated hardware, we prime it, and then we paint it. And he's, no, I want stain. Yeah, but look at what we got, man. He said, look, it's my airplane. He goes to the airplane, comes back with a little container. And I saw my first container of Tef Gel. And he said, put these on the screws. In my shop, I'm very fortunate. I've got six technicians, six mechanics. One gal's been with me for 27 years. I haven't convinced her to get a license yet. She'd be a fantastic mechanic, because she is picky. She's not the fastest one in the shop. But when she says it's done, when we're looking at it, it's done. Okay. She's got a guy that hired on 2 months before her, so he's just 2 months over her, 27, 28 years. I've got a guy that's been with me for 32 years now. My son's the greenhorn in the crowd. He's got just at 22 years. But this group of 4 is approaching 100 years experience of working for me, working on these products, fixing saltwater things. Gives me gooseflesh that I'm blessed with that kind of thing. And they show up for work. So one of those guys, John, he's, man, no, we can't do that. And the owner said, man, fix the corrosion, okay? Put it together, take every screw, dip it in this. When you screw that to hold that wingtip on, do it. The guy goes to Colorado from there, spends the summer out there, comes back through, we check the airplane over, it goes to the Bahamas, it spends 4 months, and he's commuting from Green Turtle Key to West Palm Beach, and that sort of thing. He does preventative, in that when he taxis up the beach, he will rinse the airplane with fresh water, that sort of thing. It takes him 30 minutes to do it. He's got a neighbor 2 houses over who is a Canadian, and he's a sailor. Because when this guy hits the beach, actually he can't hit the beach. He's got to leave the gear up, kind of beach on the beach. He gets, these trellises you can buy 4 by 8 feet, and you can grow roses or whatever, or make fences. He's got dive weights attached to a number of these, because he's got a little section of sugar sand between the water sand and where he can get to grass, and you're going to get stuck in there. I can verify. I didn't put the things in. But, so he beaches, puts them down, taxis up. He'll take the groceries out of the airplane, and it's Susan's job to get the groceries to the house. He starts working on the airplane, and about 2 hours later, he's done with it. But he's rinsed, greased, washed, lubricated, any point he can do it. Back to the Cessnas with the brackets under the floor, we can't take them apart, put Tef-Gel on those brackets unless we're down there doing a repair. But what can be done is Bow Shield or LPS3. These are corrosion inhibitors that have physical body to them. You can spray them on. LPS3 I like because when you initially spray it, it's got a real low viscosity and it penetrates between layers. It'll get between the steel and the aluminum as good as anything out there, okay? And then with time, it'll sort of tack up. So you've got a physical, visible film on that steel part. Now you may be taking a can of LPS3, what is it? Prist. You gotta look for them now and had to find other sources. But Prist used to come with a little device you could clip on the fuel cap, and then you could click it, and while the guy's putting the jet fuel in, it's spraying Prist into your tank at a given rate. And we used to use those little coils of tubing. We could plug them into a can of LPS3, and I could hook the little clip onto a forcep or handle or something, and I could get it under the floor, spray a given part. There's always hidden places where you look, so that in the inspect phase, you never stop looking, because you may have treated this airplane 10 times. Whoa, there's a bolt back there, or there's a screw back there, and it's all bright, shiny, and bare. So you got to hit it. So it goes that way. Any other question? Yes, sir.
Hey, what's your thoughts on the corrosion inhibitor that's approved by Lycoming for the oils? Are you seeing that giving increased cam life?
The
CamGuard. Yeah, but it's not CamGuard, whatever it is.
it's not CamGuard, but it is, in other words, I'm trying to think of, it's got an LW number, and where that initially came out was the
H2AD.
0320 H2AD. Thank you. They came out with an engine that had lifters, much like we use in the automotive business. And that lifter didn't have as much physical support around it. It was a little smaller diameter, which resulted in higher contact pressures. And what was happening, due to either corrosion or lack of lubrication, that cam lobe would come around, hit that lifter, and it wouldn't just lift the valve or move the lifter to open the valve, it would crack the case, okay? So then they came out with the Lycoming additive. I can't think of the chemical name of it, but it's got a part number, and when you did an oil change, you added that additive to the thing. It's not unlike CamGuard, And hey guys, this is a function of money. You want to get anything done in this world? Lubrication. And that comes in a couple of flavors. Never forget that $100 bills lubricate twice as good as 50s. Okay? But when you're building oil that you've got to sell and try to make a profit, you want to make good oil because you don't want a bad reputation for your product. But the flip side is, if you put everything in it that can make it work better and better and better, now we can't afford it. It won't sell. So you got to find a compromise. People like CamGuard come out as a secondary. So what you pay for a pint of CamGuard could be incorporated in all those quarts of oil. It's not, because there's a balance there of how we have to do business on that. You had your hand up, sir.
Yeah, I have two things. I believe that, I'm almost certain that Aeroshell and I believe Phillips 20W50 contain that LW anti-scuffing. So they're in there, in the quantity you need, because there was an AD on the H2ADs.
Yeah.
The other thing is, you mentioned your Prist thing. I just take and cut the little red nozzle that comes with it, and I put a piece of heat shrink on it. And that's my extension.
You can, no,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can put the heat shrink on it, now
Yeah.
you've got a little tube.
Now, yeah, it's
You only shrink it
curvable.
over the,
Yeah, and I don't
Yeah.
have to, try to just reach in, and, yeah, just like you said.
and it just, this is a never ending thing. And I've got mechanics that love me in one breath and hate me in others, and that, since I've worked for you, I realized that you can put things together that are square. And he said, I put the cabinets in at home and they're sitting like that, and he said, it drives me mad. I look at that, I think of you, a few choice words, But it's also very satisfying that you develop a team that works for you like that. Okay, any other questions? I got something I'd like to, back in the back, and speak loud. I'm a deaf old pilot.
What are your thoughts on zinc coatings and zinc anodes?
Say that again?
What are your thoughts on zinc coatings or zinc anodes?
I still don't have it. Somebody.
Zinc.
Zinc anode.
Zinc anodes on the floats.
Anodes, okay? Anodes are great things and they can work. But by and large, anodes work within a physical distance of about 5 feet. In other words, they've got an electrical effect that they can do over a 5-foot range around that anode. And we've got airplanes and that sort of thing, and we can put lots of little anodes here and there. Whip Air, AAASF, people like that do them in limited places. We've got to look at the anode in that. I'll give you an example, and I'm not knocking floats, I love them all, and we maintain them all. And I work with AAASF and Whip Air, Bauman even, because we've got some of those operating down there. We had a set of AAASFs that were, it was an amphib that stayed in fresh water. It didn't have anything to lift it out of the water, okay? And AAASF uses a stainless line to go from the bulkhead fitting in the float back to the hydraulic system. And then a stainless line goes and attaches to the actuator. That stainless line, the way it was routed, passed about probably a solid inch away from the actuator. And we're doing an annual on it. He didn't need 100 hours or anything like that. We're doing an annual. And the guy looks up there in the aluminum cylinder of the actuator, it had eaten 2/3 of the way through that. It looked like a little moon crater in there. Some spots were deeper than others, but somehow the stainless and the aluminum and a battery was set up, and the weaker element, or actually the more active element, gives up to the less active. And the stuff was gone. Yes, sir.
You need the appropriate anode too. In salt water, you use zinc. In fresh water, you should use magnesium.
Yes, that is correct. Magnesium has enough activity. You've got a weaker electrolyte in fresh water. So you need some stronger elements on at least one end, and the anode is the end that allows you to do that.
Another thing with like ACF 50 and stuff, I'm an experimental aircraft builder, and I don't like the mess of squirting lubricant all over. So where I can reach it, I use a syringe. You can go buy them at Walgreens, get 5 for $1, and reach it, put your lubricant in the syringe and go in right on the parts you want to lubricate, give them a good coating, but don't spread it all over, which is a dust attractant.
Yeah.
That's just my maintenance trick.
Down where airplanes sound like cash registers, you spray it all over. Yeah, we really do. And actually you got a limit. And sometimes we get them in, we've got to somebody's been squirting LP on, rudder turnbuckles. What was it? I had on a Cessna 180, a rudder cable fail where the cable went into the fitting back at the bell cranks just forward of the staff. Bottom of the bell crank goes to the water rudder. Bell crank transfers the motion back to the rudder. You got 2 of them in there. And where the fork On the aft end of that turnbuckle assembly, attached to the bell crank, it corroded. So each time you cycled that bell crank, that turnbuckle went up and down. And where the cable was sledged into the end of that turnbuckle, it just kept bending it, that cable failed. Boom, gone. You know, he happened to be steering on the water near his place of business. He had left the seaplane base, went to his office, had some stuff to do, called Snake, came back out. He's getting ready to go out and look at jobs that are going on in the oil field. And turned to set up takeoff, said he was reaching down for the water rudder and felt his foot shake. And on a 180, those rudder cables are loaded with the springs up there in the nose. 185, you've got a bungee in there, it won't be quite the same result. But he managed to limp back and get to the dock. It was a new surprise for me. I've got something for you guys. Somebody outside admired my wife's bag. And when I brought this on Delta, this wasn't inflated. But if you were to measure this globe with a tape measure and then take an average of diameter around the equator, diameter over the poles, you get an effective diameter of 10 point whatever inches. And what I want to convey to you looking at this globe is where we operate. If you take 2 sheets of paper and lay it up here on Alaska, that's where virtually all civil aviation operates, from the surface up to the thickness of 2 sheets of paper. That's the scale. You want to go into space? Take 3 credit cards, lay them on each other flat. That thickness is about 90 thousandths of an inch. 90 thousandths. It's, you know, and you lay that on there, you are in what is classified as space. The satellites and stuff up there operate extremely close to the surface of our little blue marble. And the air that we use to fly in and breathe and support this ecosystem is an onion skin on our planet. Let's take care of it. It's meaningful. I didn't get many of these, but I got 2 more. Way back in the middle. All right, you guys can pick them out. Wait a minute. Got 1 more for up front. How's that? First catch. All right. Any other questions, Scott? Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.